I didn't discover the answer to the code, but I did discover myself. So I
Oh,
think that's all that really matters.
well, not for the show.
Okay. Well then, no, I failed. I failed too.
Okay. Hey, everybody, welcome to Solve It. This is a podcast where we talk about puzzles, ciphers, and the history of encryption. I'm Sam Cherry, hosting as always with
Zach Johnson.
Zach. How are you?
I am doing frustrated, but we will get into that later when we talk about the puzzle. And I am very tired
Why are you tired?
uh, from trying to solve this puzzle.
Oh, okay. So it's about the not just like
It's
okay.
about the puzzle, yeah. This isn't a show where I talk about my problems.
That's fair. I guess that makes sense. Here on Solve It, Zach and I send each other puzzles every week, and to make the puzzles fair, we have a couple of rules. The first rule is that it has to be an existing cipher or code system. The second rule is that all the clues have to be there initially, so there shouldn't be any guessing involved. And the third rule is that you cannot use a computer to decipher the codes for you. All the coding has to be done by hand. All right, so this week, Zach, I sent you a puzzle. Do you have it in front of you?
I do.
Did you solve the puzzle?
I most certainly did not.
All right.
And I'm frustrated because this is the one I worked the hardest on. And the second I saw it, I was like, oh, it's this, because I'd been researching ciphers for the podcast. And I was like, boom, I know exactly what this is. I'm going to come through this and I'm just going to own it right quick. This will not take me any time at all. And then the thing I thought it was wasn't that. And the next thing I thought it was wasn't it. And then I just started doing tons of guesswork. And by the time I was doing guesswork, I was like, this is a waste of my time.
I'm glad you think the podcast is a waste of your time.
No. I mean, it was a waste of my time being like, maybe if I turn it this way and I draw the line here, 110 looks like H0.
No.
And I was just doing stupid stuff, just trying to solve this puzzle because I was so motivated, but I did not get it.
I want to hear. I actually want to hear because you texted me at one point. I'm gonna crack this wide open. So I want to hear what you tried. But first,
Okay.
we should describe the puzzle. So if you would like to see it, it is on our Twitter and Instagram, which are both at Solve It Podcast, or you can find it on my Twitter, Samuel_Cherry_.
So the tweet says the original version was a little too national treasure, so I made a variation. The picture is it's a black background with white words on it, and the words are Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven,
Correct.
and that's in the background. So you can kind of see just some of the words of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. And honestly, the only reason that I know The Raven exists, and this is such a me thing that you'll appreciate, Sam. This poem was featured on Treehouse of Horror 1, the first Halloween episode of The Simpsons.
Oh, that makes me sad.
And so my only literary understanding prior to this episode and me doing tons of research, the only literary understanding I had of this poem was what was on The Simpsons. And
That's it. You solved it. That's it. It's the answer is Simpson. All right. Thank you for joining us to solve it.
I read the poem a few times, and then I rewatched the Simpsons episode, and it's not too far off. So shout out to them.
I mean,
and there's an outline of a raven, or there's an outline of a raven over top of all of the words, and on top of the raven there is a collection of numbers, and those numbers are 110, 72, 18, 123, 38, 4, 12, 61, and 115. Did you hear me right there? I was auditioning to be one of the Powerball people.
I would take you.
Yeah, I was reading off those numbers with the same professionalism as if I was announcing the Powerball. So if this doesn't work out, that is definitely a side career I could really find myself into.
Yeah, I agree.
So in trying to solve this puzzle, I threw it through a bunch of ciphers that I thought it would be. One of them was this cipher called a poem code. But a poem code is just essentially like, if it is 1, it's A, if it's 2, it's B, and da 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 da. But the first number is 110. So I was like, okay, that one's not it.
Right.
But the one that I thought it was, and this is where I thought, now this really attributes to me not knowing anything about this poem. I was explaining this to a coworker. I said, oh, I know exactly what's happening here. I'm just going to go and circle the 110th word, and then I'll circle the 72nd word, the 18th word, and then that will reveal the message. And then I pulled the poem, and I was like, goodness gracious, this poem is much longer than I remember it being. And then so I did that, and I was like, okay, I'm like 2 stanzas in or whatever. So I was like, and then like it was complete nonsense. I didn't even write it down. It was just nonsense. And then I was like, oh, I got it. It's going to be the stanzas. That'll be the thing. I'll have to like find some code within each of the stanzas. But the poem, at least the one that I was looking at, only has 108 stanzas. So I was like, this isn't it either. So after that, I just started reading the poem more and more and more. And that's when I realized that I was like getting farther away from what was going on. Because as I was reading the poem, I was doing those scenes from Paper Towns where I was trying to discover who you were. Like I was trying to find you in some little paper town, by reading this poem over and over and over again. But that did not work either. So if you were hiding somewhere, I didn't find you. I'm sorry.
Nope, I'm still in Nashville recording in my closet, so don't worry.
Man, that's what the fans come for. The fans come for that extreme professionalism that we have here at Solid Podcast.
Recording in a closet.
Recording in a closet, shirtless, mind you, but
yes, they don't know that, but yes, it gets very hot in here.
But they do now.
Yeah, they do now know that I record shirtless.
So yeah, after much work and trying to find it through a bunch of ciphers, and honestly, right now, I read the National Treasure thing, still have no clue.
Yeah.
Maybe I do.
Yeah, I mean, if you solve it while I'm explaining it, then you win, but I'm going to guess you'll be listening, so probably not.
My only guess right now, after the National Treasure thing, is I think no, I don't watch National Treasure every day.
Sure.
I watch Hitch every day.
Sure.
I believe there is a scene in National Treasure where they get they get like Benjamin Franklin's like letters. Yeah, they get Benjamin Franklin's letters, and they have this little kid go and like circle every whatever word, and then he runs it back to the guy, and he like figures out what the thing is. Is that what you're referring to?
It is not.
Oh, cuss. All right, well then never mind. I was like, I got this.
No, it's not.
Okay, well whatever. Never mind.
Okay.
Then I don't have it.
All right. To explain the cipher, I like I said in the tweet, it is a variation, and it is a variation on the Beale cipher, which is described in the Beale Papers. So the Beale Papers is a document that was put out in the 1840s describing the relationship between Mr. Robert Morris and Mr. Thomas Beale. Robert Morris was born in the late 1700s and soon became a merchant. In his career as a merchant, he lost a lot of money in the tobacco trade, and his wife suggested to him to open a hotel with the money they had left, and so he became the owner of the Washington Hotel. He was the innkeeper of the hotel for many years and gained a great reputation for being trustworthy and loyal and kind. There's actually stories that Mr. Morris allowed a boarder who could not afford to pay the rent and would have been homeless otherwise to stay in his hotel for the rest of that boarder's life. And he actually lived in the hotel for free for 20 years, just out of the compassion of Mr. Morris. As the years went on, one winter, a group of 3 Virginians came to stay at the hotel. And they were staying for the winter because back in the terrible, terrible past, that was a thing you had to do, was bunker down in a town in a hotel for the entire season or you would die. So they stayed at the Washington for the whole winter, and these were, very stately, impressive men. And they would drink and have fun and meet all the tenants, and they became friends with Mr. Morris and really enjoyed their stay at the hotel and became very close with the owner. And then when spring came, two of the men decided to leave, and they were going west. And the third man, who would eventually be going west, chose to stay for a couple more weeks, and that man was Thomas Beale. Over those few weeks, Beale became much closer with Morris, and they began to confide in each other and became friends. Then, after a few weeks, Beale left. Years passed, and Morris continued to run the hotel. And one year, again, the three Virginians showed back up. The same as always, they stayed for the winter. They were very fun and enjoyable. But this time, when they were leaving, Mr. Beale left a box with Mr. Morris, and it had a letter. In that letter, Mr. Beale explained to Mr. Morris that he was going west for a hunting party again, like he had the year before, and that he was leaving this box for Mr. Morris to keep safe. But because of fighting with Native Americans and the general deadliness of the West, he knew that there was a chance that he wouldn't come back. So he said, if I don't come back in 10 years to get this box, open it. Mr. Morris, being trustworthy, agreed to this. What he didn't realize was this is the last time he would ever speak to Mr. Beale. In fact, this is the last time anyone would hear from Mr. Beale ever again. And years went by, and eventually 10 years had passed, and he still had heard nothing from Mr. Beale. But because he didn't want to open this thing that was not his, and he still had faith that Mr. Beale would come back, he chose not to open it. He didn't open the box for 23 years. So he's a much older man at this point, and once he finally opens it, he finds a bunch of papers and a letter that was addressed to him. The letter had explained that there was actually a secondary motive behind the men coming to the hotel. They had, in fact, not been going on hunting trips at all over these years. Years ago, when they were on an actual hunting trip, their party was out in the wilderness, and they came upon a ravine. In that ravine, they saw a glint of something and went down to investigate it, where they found a big stash of gold. Not like gold coins, but like gold minerals. And they started mining it, but there was so much that it became very clear very soon that they were not going to be able to safely carry this in a wagon because they could be, raided or something very quickly. So they had to hide it somewhere, and they couldn't leave it in the ravine because they had found it pretty easily. Another party could also find it easily. So they decided to have a secret hiding spot for it. But they wanted someone who could watch over that spot for them and keep it safe. So they needed to find someone who had a great reputation for being kind and trustworthy. And who do you think that was?
Shoot, I know just the guy.
Right, Mr. Morris. So when they had come on that first visit, it was under kind of false pretenses. Yes, they needed to stay for the winter, but the reason they chose the Washington is because they wanted to find Mr. Morris. And the reason that Mr. Beale stayed an extra few weeks was so that he could get to know him and begin to confide in him. And they weren't actually going on another hunting trip. They were making various trips back to the ravine to mine more gold and store it away. The remainders of the papers were a set of ciphers and codes. Now, they were all headed saying that one was the location, one was the contents, and one was the people involved, right? But not explaining exactly what all these are. So because Mr. Morris had waited so long, he was now quite an old man and nearing the end of his life, and he knew that. So he brought another person on to help him decode these ciphers. And that person is the writer of the Beale papers. It'll make sense in a second why he is writing these papers at all. So the writer of the Beale papers takes up the mantle of trying to decipher the codes. And Mr. Morris dies, having never figured them out. And he cracked the first one, which was the contents, telling him that there was this huge stash of gold and silver and jewels hidden away. What he couldn't crack were the second two that told the location of the gold and who it belonged to. You kind of understood that the people who it belonged to were the people who were in the party, right? Mm-hmm. And their relatives. So if they died, they'd be able to disperse the money to their relatives, and so it would say like the names of the relatives and like the location. All this is written in the papers, but you don't know who those people are because they never cracked the third one.
Wait, ever?
Ever.
Dang.
They have still not cracked the ciphers in the Beale papers.
Are they like around?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I read them.
They still haven't been cracked. So like,
Nope.
well, I know two 20-something-year-olds that will definitely know how to do that.
So it's important to talk about why the writer, first of all, is called the writer, and why he published the Beale papers at all. He mentions at the end of the papers that his quest to solve the last two ciphers, and we'll explain how he solves the first one. The code that he used to solve the first one is actually the code that I sent you. His quest to solve the last two puzzles drove him to poverty. He lost his job, he lost his family, his career, his wealth, because he couldn't solve them. And so he was absolving himself of this guilt of the last wishes of both Mr. Morris and Mr. Beale to solve this. So he says, I'm just going to write it all out, explain the whole story, give you the ciphers, publish them. And he wanted to remain anonymous because he said that if he put his name on it, people would write him letters asking him questions. And he said, then I think the phrase is, the nature of my work would only have changed, right? So he would still be doing the same amount of work.
Yeah.
So he's like, no, I'm going to lay everything I know out in these papers. And and he passed it off to a friend of Mr. Morris, whose name is Ward, who publishes the papers. And so he can stay anonymous. So that's the contents of the Beale papers. Now, what is important for the puzzle is how he solved the first one. Here's the part where you get really furious.
Oh, baby.
You were very close.
I mean, yeah.
So could you remind the audience of what the tweet was?
The tweet, the tweet says, the original version was a little too national treasure, so I made a variation.
So the writer came to the conclusion that you also did, which is that the numbers are far too big for a simple substitution, right? You can't simply take that. There's no, what is it, 110th? Is that the first
It is.
number? There's no 110th letter, so you couldn't do that. So what he came up with, and he actually has solved the cipher in the Beale papers, right? He explains how he did it and solves it in the Beale papers. So what he came up with was perhaps it's connected to a document, like you figured out as well. And he went through and circled the words that corresponded with the letters or with the numbers. You follow?
Yeah,
you did all this as well.
I'm pulling up the Raven right now.
Okay. He then just took the first letter of those words.
What?
And that's how he deciphered it.
All right.
And the document that he used was written by a Virginian gentleman named Thomas Jefferson. Can you guess what document that was?
The Declaration of Independence.
It's the Declaration of Independence. That was the national treasure clue.
Okay. That's a pretty far away clue.
What? That's like the whole thing. We have to steal the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, but like I would have had to have known all the story leading up to that.
Well, yeah, but if you looked up Declaration of Independence cipher, you would find it.
Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Wait, is there a cipher in the Declaration of Independence?
No, but there's a cipher that uses the Declaration of Independence, and it's in the Beale papers.
Yeah, there's not a cipher in the Declaration of Independence. There's a map, though.
Right, yeah. Walk me through, how do you solve this puzzle?
Okay, so there are 9 letters, or 9 numbers, rather.
Correct.
And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there are 9 letters, 9 numbers, rather.
Correct.
Which correspond to 9 words that are found in the Raven.
Correct.
And I guess for the first one, I had to go find the 110th word.
Correct.
And then whatever letter that is what like the answer is.
Yes, that corresponds with that number. Yes, that letter corresponds with that number, and then you will just spell out what it says.
What?
To make it a little quicker, it is only in the first 3 stanzas, so you don't have to look very far. But I'll give you some time because it does take a little time.
Shoot, I really wish that I had written down when I was trying to solve this earlier. I think I like like balled it up and threw it in a trash can in rage.
A suggestion, if for you and just the audience at home, an easy way to do it is to just count the number in each row, and then like if the last word on that row or that line is like 11, then you write 11, and then if the last word on the second is like the 24th, you write 24, so you can reference pretty quick.
I'm not gonna write on my computer.
Oh, you didn't? I guess I printed it out. That makes sense. And while Zach is solving the puzzle, big shout out to Fruity Bosco. He is currently trying to solve our website puzzle, which is unsolved. And for also sending us a puzzle, which I think I've got mostly solved, but I still don't have an answer. Please send us puzzles. We love them, and they're really cool. As long as they stay within the rules of having all the information and being a known system, we'd love to figure them out. So thanks for that. Zach?
Okay, the first word is not A.
The first letter is definitely no. Yeah, you're at 109. You need to be at 110.
Am I?
Yeah, angels is not the word.
Okay, then I've oh man, jeez Louise. Oh my gosh.
Can I just let me just speed this up.
Got it. I figured it out.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that's so frustrating. Oh man, Sam. Okay, so
you figured it out.
No. Whenever I'm working on your puzzles, I have a notebook beside of me.
Yeah.
My notebook, I like, because I don't know the answer to the puzzle yet. I'll give the episode or the puzzle a tentative title as I'm working on it.
Sure.
The title I gave this puzzle, written at the top of the very piece of paper I've been working on this entire time, is Nevermore. Which is so frustrating.
Because, of course, the answer is Nevermore.
Oh my gosh. That's so infuriating. I could have answered that from just my Simpsons knowledge.
That's true, yeah. The thing is, normally this is where we would end the podcast, but I kind of gave you a bait and switch because that's not the actual puzzle.
I am so fierce.
So
okay.
The actual puzzle cannot be solved with a code or a cipher, but it has to do with the codes and the ciphers.
I hope the answer isn't friendship or something.
What? We've met, yes. The answer will never be friendship.
No, the answer it'll be friendship, but the answer will be the friendship we've gained along the way.
No, no, it is not. So I got to thinking that it seems strange the other two ciphers haven't been solved, right?
It seems strange.
So the first cipher was solved by the Declaration of Independence. You would assume that Beale had connected the other two ciphers to other two documents, yeah? And in the mid-1800s, while there were lots of books, there weren't that many books. And then you winnow it down to books that were in Virginia and books that were in Virginia that Beale would have access to. So it had to be a widely printed book. I would guess if I were Beale, I would use books that were in Morris's library, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a pretty small collection of books that we could use to solve it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet no one can.
Huh. This first puzzle is used for the Declaration of Independence, right?
Yes.
Huh.
So let's look at another option here.
Okay.
So, now I picked Nevermore and I picked Edgar Allan Poe because I'm a very big fan of Edgar Allan Poe. So let me read you a quote from Edgar Allan Poe. He was saying this in reference to a review of Nathaniel Hawthorne. In the whole composition, there should be no word written of which the tendency, direct or indirect, is not to the one pre-established design. And what he's saying is that everything has a reason. And when you write something, everything should have its place. Everything should be on purpose. And if you do something, there should be a meaning to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the Beale papers, there are two French phrases. One is par excellence, and the other is another French phrase.
Okay.
Poe wrote 70 short stories, 64 of which contain foreign language references, 6 of which contain the phrase par excellence. In 66 of Edgar Allan Poe's stories, he frequently uses indefinite articles like about 3 men or 5 or 6 miles. These phrases are used a lot in the Beale Papers as well. He is also known to use descriptive conjunctions. These are 2 adjectives that are put together with an and. So an example would be shadowy and vague, or bitter and serious. There are 50 examples of this in the Beale Papers. Also, it is curious that both Beale, his 2 men, and Mr. Morris are all described as Virginian gentlemen, as well as Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, who is also a Virginian gentleman. You might not be surprised to know that Edgar Allan Poe was born and raised in Virginia and went to Virginia University, and was known for putting locations that were important to him in his stories. He also used themes of rising to wealth and losing your wealth, and mystery. He was also known for a series of hoaxes that he would pull on people and the media, including the balloon hoax, where he convinced some newspaper writers that they had taken a hot air balloon across the Atlantic Ocean in 3 days. And he was known for his love of cryptology. He wrote a story called The Gold Bug that centered around a seemingly unsolvable cipher. Zach, there's a reason you can't solve the other 2 ciphers. And it's because you were never supposed to. It's because there's no treasure. There's no Mr. Beale. There's no Mr. Morris. There's only a writer and his raven. And over the years, scores of people have been scratching and searching for the answers to these documents, pouring knowledge into these ciphers, all the time wondering if they'll ever find answers, looking and asking, will the search ever be over? And quote the raven, nevermore. Thanks for joining us on Solve It. My name's Sam Cherry, co-hosting with Zach Johnson. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Solve It Podcast, and also on our website, solveitpodcast.com.
I also want to thank Robert Ward, who wrote the paper The Last Haunting of Edgar Allan Poe, an identification of Poe's preferences contained in the Beale Papers. It was a huge help to the research, and a really interesting read, so if you get a chance, you should go read it.
Join us next week when Zach teaches us how to use Polaroids and tattoos to solve a murder. Thanks. Bye.